The sound of rain hammering down on dark asphalt, a constant, monotonous murmur that swallowed everything else, was the only witness to what was about to unfold. In a torn leather booth, under the harsh, cruel, fluorescent glare of a roadside diner, the laughter wasn't joyous, it was sharp, slicing the air like cheap knives. A young woman, alone with her steaming plate, was trying to shrink under the relentless scrutiny of four men who had long forgotten the meaning of decency. Their voices, amplified by the echo of the empty room, mocked her struggle to move, every small effort she made to lift her spoon. What began as a filthy joke had become a spectacle of gratuitous cruelty. And in the corner booth, a man had just finished his coffee. And that night, under that sick light, the story proved that courage doesn't always wear armor, but sometimes it does wear leather and patches. Stay until the end, because this story proves that brotherhood is louder than fear, and the price of humiliation is often higher than any bully can afford to pay.
Her name was Lena. She lived on the quiet edge of the world, in the kind of town where people learn to look away. For her, the world was not an easy place, and every movement she made was a conscious calculation against pain and judgment. Tonight, the Last Chance Diner was just a brief sanctuary, the only place for 10 miles where the lights didn't flicker. As steam rose from her bowl of soup, her posture was a painful mix of dignity and vulnerability, a portrait of silent endurance. The four men, passing truckers with souls rusted by too many miles and too little sleep, had seen an opportunity to assert their dominance in the empty space, a pathetic need to feel big at the expense of someone smaller. Their jokes grew louder, their laughter more shrill, and the weight of their malice fell upon Lena like a lead blanket. She just wanted to finish her meal and leave, but there are moments in life where escape is not an option, and the indifference of others becomes the true deafening noise.
The tension thickened, becoming almost palpable, like the heavy morning fog that clings to the windshield. The truckers began to mimic her gait, loudly dragging their feet across the tiled floor. One of the chairs had slid, and the dry thud echoed, making everyone, except the group of tormentors, tense up. Had something fallen? Was she hurt? No one dared to look, much less intervene. The complicit silence of the other patrons was its own form of violence. But there was one man, seated in the shadow of a forgotten booth by the window. He was large, his worn leather jacket glimmering dimly under the light. His face was hidden, obscured by the brim of a cap and the weight of exhaustion. But his stillness was unsettling. He hadn't eaten anything. He had only been nursing a black coffee that was long cold. A pair of heavy leather boots stretched casually from beneath the table, the tips slightly scuffed from the road. This man hadn't laughed. He hadn't moved. He was simply watching. The question was he waiting for something, or was he just another patron who had learned to look the other way? The air in the diner suddenly turned cold, and the sound of the vulgar laughter felt, for the first time, out of place, too loud for the atmosphere. The tormentors hadn't seen him rise. In that world, brotherhood is not a word. It is an oath tattooed on the skin and woven into the patch of a vest. For a man who has ridden countless dusty roads and witnessed acts most only see in nightmares, gratuitous injustice in a place like this is unacceptable. The code is simple. The strong protect the vulnerable. They do not exploit them. There was a moment of silence, a pause suspended in time, as the man stood up, his large shadow swallowing the trucker's table. The leather creaked with the movement, a guttural sound that sliced through the background murmur. His patch, now visible under the neon light, needed no introduction. They were the colors of a life lived unbound, the colors of a brutal, honest road. He did not speak. There was no need. His eyes said it all, a cold, silent promise that the line had been crossed. If you believe loyalty still has meaning and the code of the road should be respected, subscribe to Hell's Road. Because stories like this are far from over, and only here is the truth of the asphalt told. As the biker approached the table, his presence became a wall of quiet intimidation. The truckers, who a moment before were predators, suddenly felt like caught children. The air around them grew heavier, charged with the smell of diesel, old leather, and a barely contained threat. He didn't rush. Every step was deliberate, carrying the weight not just of his body, but of his club's history, of 1,000 miles traveled under merciless sun and driving rain. He carried his colors like armor, symbols of loyalty stitched in leather. They were more than cloth. They were proof of a code of honor that refused to die. You can carry that same spirit, that commitment to a truth greater than oneself. Our official Hell's Road gear is linked below, for those who live by the code, both on and off the highway. His hand, large and calloused from the grip of a handlebar for decades, rested gently on the back of one aggressor's chair. The game was over. It was the thud of the hand on the chair, not a word, that stopped the laughter. The trucker turned, a smug smirk frozen on his face, but that expression melted instantly when his eyes met the biker's patch. The name on the vest was a legend, and the reputation of his colors traveled faster than any machine. The silence that followed was absolute, a void where cruel laughter had been. The biker didn't raise his voice. His voice, when it finally came, was low, rough, like rolling gravel, but the sound filled every corner of the diner. He didn't ask what was going on. He already knew. He simply looked at the four men and then, with a slow, deliberate motion, slid a heavy silver coin across the table, right in front of the leader. "That," he rumbled, "is the cost of the lesson you just learned. You leave, now. And if you ever harass a lone woman on any road I know, the dead in asphalt." There was no defiance, no reply.
Fear was a silent, effective poison. The four men rose, their movements uncoordinated and shameful, and stumbled out the door like ghosts, leaving a trail of humiliation.
The tension bled out of the diner like a collective sigh, and the sound of the rain was once again the only thing audible. The biker walked over to Lena's table, who was looking at him with a mix of fear and gratitude. He didn't say anything to her. He simply took a clean napkin and gently placed it beside her soup, a small gesture of humanity in a world full of roughness. Then, without waiting for thanks, he returned to his booth, took the last sip of his cold coffee, and stood up. Justice doesn't always come with grand speeches or sirens. Sometimes it arrives on a roaring engine. Some roads lead to redemption, others to memory. If you want to keep the fire of justice and brotherhood alive, the official Hell's Road store is linked below, where the code lives beyond the story.
Moments later, the deep rumble of a V-twin engine broke the night's calm, a sound that promised more asphalt, more stories. Lena remained alone in the restored silence, no longer afraid but contemplative. The biker was gone, a shadow mounted on steel and chrome. He had restored her dignity, not with words, but with the menacing stillness of a man who understands the true weight of power. In the end, it wasn't about being a hero, but about being a man. It was about a forgotten code, the unspoken law of the road, that no one deserves to be belittled for how they were born or how they walk. As the sound of the engine faded into the horizon, taking the darkness and the threat with it, a thin but firm ray of hope had found its way into the Last Chance Diner. This was one of the many forgotten legends of the road, proof that even in the darkest corners of the highway, the honor of one man can silence the cruelty of a crowd.